Welcome to the Seize the Day weekly podcast, your connection to all things cruising, powered by Travel with Brigetta.
I'm Julie Williams, along with Travel with Brigetta cruise expert Karla Mesa on the Seize the Day podcast. And, one thing that seems to be a growing trend is solo cruising. And by that, I don't just mean a single person going on a cruise, maybe even looking for somebody, but people even that have partners that either don't like cruising or can't go for some reason. So there seems to be some response from the industry to accommodate that, but there's also some challenges to solo cruising. And Karla, one of the things that comes to mind to me is the cost of solo cruising, because it's priced very differently than if you're going with someone to share a cabin with.
Yes. So typically all cabins are priced for double occupancy. That's how the cruise lines, sell out their rooms. That's what they have, budgeted for, if you will. So when you go on there yourself and you type in, one person, one cabin, you're going to see something called a single supplement fee, which is basically that fee, that price that would be paid by a second person occupying the room. So
you're paying for
only
both.
pay taxes and port fees for yourself, but you'll see that single supplement fee to round out the price of what the cruise line would typically get for filling that room with two people, because that's what their expectation is.
Okay, so what I think I hear you saying is I'm going to go alone, but I'm going to pay as if the same amount as if someone was with me.
Yes, that is not every time, but that is typical. That is typical if you just went online, typed in one person, one interior cabin, one balcony cabin. That is most likely what you will see. Now, like you said, there is a demand now for solo traveling, whether it be single traveling or just solo adventures. So there are some cruise lines that are catering to that and providing more options for people that does not include a single supplement fee.
When I think of solo cruising, when a cruise line has solo cabins, which they used to have like one maybe on a ship or two, I think I'm going to get stuck on an inside cabin, a tiny little inside cabin, if I'm going in a singles cabin, or solo cabin rather. What do you think? Is that true, or can I get a balcony and go solo?
So that's not going to be true in every scenario. There are some dedicated solo cabins that are, dedicated to one person, maybe a twin or like smaller full-size bed, and definitely a lot less square footage. Usually is going to be an interior room. But if that's an issue for you, going through a travel agent, we usually can at least take a fine-tooth comb and go through itineraries that might have balconies or bigger regular interior rooms that either don't include that single supplement because maybe they're just really trying to sell out that itinerary, or we can at least get a reduced single supplement for those same reasons.
Okay, and I've heard that we should have our travel agent check out all the other cabins, because I've heard that on occasion when they're having specials, again trying to sell out the rooms, you could get like a balcony cabin for less than you would pay for the single cabin. So have you seen that happen very much? It's obviously worth looking into.
It doesn't happen often. Again, that's going to be under a circumstance where the cruise line is really trying to sell out certain rooms. And sometimes they are trying to sell out those higher tiered rooms before interior cabins, because you have so many people that choose, if you're just budget conscious, you might have chosen to get a guaranteed interior room, which means the cruise line will choose that for you. So someone that paid to actually pick out their room, they're going to be in front of you to get an upgrade. So if you have all these people that already paid for a guaranteed, and that's all the cruise line has to do for them, they're going to have all these other balcony rooms that they need to fill that they can either upgrade or they can give to you at your single price with a reduced single supplement fee that you would still get more out of than if they upgraded to people that chose guaranteed. So it's a very specific formula for that to happen. So you can't always count on it. But if that's something that's very important to you, it's worth talking to your travel agent and finding something that works for you, because it's very much possible that we can.
I have to call you guys. I've thought about going solo, but I have a fear. I'm a social person, and I also love my solitude. I often live alone, and I love it. I don't get lonely doing it, but there's nothing worse than being lonely in the middle of a crowd of everybody who's having a great time, and you're all by yourself and there's no connection. So what do you think about that?
Well, I would say, first of all, on these cruise lines that do a little more catering to solo travelers, that more than likely that won't be the case. You might think to yourself that you're going to end up in a situation like that, but more than likely you won't, because they have a lot of dedicated programs and spaces for solo travelers. That way you can meet each other. You can start small conversations, and maybe you spark conversation with someone. They say, yeah, I really want to see the show later tonight. You're like, I've planned on that as well. Maybe we can do that together. Or, so and so, I really want to try the new sushi spot. Oh, that's what I wanted to do for lunch today too.
Mm-hmm.
So most cruise lines on the first day will have like a solo meetup, and depending on the cruise line will depend on, how successful it is. I know Norwegian is actually right now like top of the list, really dedicated to making that experience for solo travelers one that they won't forget.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually host their solo travelers in a specific area that is only available to them. You have to have a key card that matches a solo cabin to enter the solo studio, they call it. And It's almost like another hangout spot. They have couches, they have snacks, they have coffee machines, there's TVs, there's board games, and you can just stroll in there to have some free time outside of your room, but still feel like you're in the comfort of relaxing and not necessarily going out on the ship and doing the activities. So that's a great place to meet people as well. You're gonna come across a lot of things like that. Another thing I want to know as well is, aside from the solo travelers that you'll be around, if you're specifically in a solo cabin, you're going to be on a ship with, thousands of people for multiple days. You're bound to see the same people multiple times. And I always think of it as like going to the grocery store. If you get there, around the same time as some people, you might notice as you go through the aisles, you pass by the same person. And maybe by the third or fourth time, you finally smile and say hi. Or you might say like, oh yeah, notice something they're picking out. I need the same thing. So there are a lot of instances where small conversations or small points of interest you'll notice with other people. We're like, oh, we, went to reach for the same muffin or something.
Yeah. I went on a cruise, and it's been so long. I was a single mom. My son was 12. Okay. It was his first cruise, and it was a big ship. And I think it was Carnival. It was like, years ago. So I don't remember, but, they had a singles get together the first night, and I went, and I looked in, and there were a bunch of people getting drunk at the bar. And then there was one classy lady sitting by herself at a table. So I walked up to her and I said, is this the singles group? And she said, yes. We started talking. We never did get hooked up with the drunk people. It was just like not our thing. But it turns out she was also traveling with a preteen son. And then we talked for a little bit, and I think had breakfast or something. I don't remember. And then that day I met another woman traveling with a preteen son. And she met another single mom traveling solo without anybody. And the four of us ended up getting together. So that worked really well. But there were two other cruise lines. I don't know if I should mention the cruise lines, that had solo events planned. And I showed up and there was nobody there. And even the staff didn't even know it was supposed to be going on. It was on the schedule, but nobody knew. And we were kind of like, okay, I guess there's nothing for us. In fact, in one instance, we went there to meet the solos group and they were also having a dance class down there, which wasn't for the solos group.
Wasn't a part of it.
So I guess it really matters, which cruise line and how they cater to singles as far as the kind of experience you'll have. And another thing is, I've thought I could never do that, but I have never heard of a person that did that regretted it. No one I've ever heard of or known has actually been lonely on a cruise ship by themselves.
That I have had the same experience as far as hearing from others. I personally haven't done solo travel. I think if I were to dip my toes in, it'd probably be something similar where I would at least take my son and, then maybe have some alone time throughout the day.
Yeah.
I definitely understand the thought of, even though you're bringing someone, wanting to make sure that the time you do have alone, you're finding things to do. One of the last cruises I went to was with Carnival, and it was a good time, but the adults I went with just wanted to spend their time at the casino, and that's just not my thing at all. And all I kept thinking to myself was, I should have just brought my son. I'm going to be on a cruise full of families, and I came to just be with adults, and I'm not even having fun with them. I should have either done my own thing or I could have brought my son.
Right. I understand that Norwegian's area is like a separate area that no one else can get into. I think they call it the studio. And kids won't be there. Only single adults 18 and older would be in there. And so not even that whole, like the corridor where the singles cabins are for the studio. And no one can even get into the hallway unless they have a cabin there.
Yes, correct. And that's a great point too, because it also makes people feel safe. When you're alone, you have to be fully aware of your surroundings and everything that you're doing and the people around you. I mean, I can personally say, especially as a woman, I feel like that every single day, every moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also know, you want to find someone who has something in common with you. I'd like to find someone who's alone that wants to go kayaking or wants to go look at parrots or, you know what I mean? And I know there are chartered cruises, like themed cruises, like a singles cruise, a dance cruise. I went on a dance cruise once, a Star Trek cruise, and Princess has, because it was Princess that the Love Boat was. They have their Love Boat cruise coming up this fall. Mm-hmm. And so if you're a Love Boat fan, even if you go solo, some of the stars from the Love Boat are going to be, running around. And also you'll probably find people who have the same passion for that show or grew up with that show, just like you did.
Yes, that would be a great, start to your solo adventures. If you're still a little nervous about trying it out, there's two different, you mentioned two different types of cruises. So
yes,
Princess has themed cruises. So like the Love Boat theme cruise is through Princess. That's something that, you can definitely get with your travel agent and book. There are some other themed cruises like specifically, like a Star Trek themed cruise, or like EDC now does cruises. So those are usually chartered affinity cruises that you actually have to go through the organization. You can still have a travel agent help you navigate everything. It's definitely a little different than our normal process.
Right.
But those are great cruises, like you said, because even though you're going solo and you can get that solo experience, you already know you're going to be surrounded with people that have a general same interest as you or have a similar possible mindset, similar demographic maybe, or age range, if that's important to you, if you're really trying to like meet people and not necessarily have, a relaxing, me time type of vacation. That would be a great start.
Yeah. And with something like the dance cruise I went on, some group had put it together and invited all the dancers who compete nationwide and that type of stuff. But in something like Princess's themed cruise, like the Love Boat cruise, can't people come to us? Can't people come to you? Because it's the cruise line who's putting that theme on.
Yes. Yes. So when it's specifically like Princess or Carnival or Royal Caribbean promoting a themed itinerary that, maybe is only happening once, it's a very specific week on a specific boat that this is happening. Yes, 100%. That is the typical process, just like if you were to pick any other itinerary with, a typical cruise liner.
And what other activities would you suggest that a solo traveler go to get to know other people to play with, even if they're not necessarily traveling solo, even if the other person isn't necessarily traveling solo?
I would definitely, I would look at all the activities going on the ship and actually just participate in what catches your eye. Like one of my favorite things that I always have to do is the Friends trivia. Friends is my absolute favorite show, and it's very popular. So it's almost on every cruise I go on. They have a Friends trivia, and I have won trophies from that. And it's a lot of fun to see all the other Friends fans and how dedicated and how much knowledge we've held on to, and it's fun to be like, okay, I'm not the only one.
When my son was younger, he and I used to watch Friends all the time. In fact, we bought all of the DVD sets. The entire show, all of the seasons.
I told someone last year, and I should have. Was it last year? I think for my birthday, I turned 30 last year, and I was like, yeah, the DVD, the Friends would be really nice.
Mm-hmm.
They have a lot of deleted scenes on there that you can't, you don't have access to on streaming services and stuff.
Oh, wow! I didn't realize that, because I used to watch it live each week, but then I always watched I would go on that cruise. I always watched the DVDs, and it was a great bonding time with my son. In fact, to take somebody like that, where you had a bonding time with them when they were younger, and you guys might want to do separate things. Like my son is 30 years younger than me, right? So you might want to do separate things, but you kind of have that one thing in common,
Right.
That's not really solo cruising though. But you do have the issue of trying to find somebody to play with.
Correct. But you know what? You actually bring up another good point, because there are some times where, yes, you might have a travel partner, but you still might want your own space.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that you want to share a cabin. I mean, the cabins are pretty small. Even when they say that it can be up to 4 people. I could not do an interior cabin with more than one other person personally. And I'm already a small person, but my stuff takes up a lot of space. So sometimes that's, that if budget isn't an issue and consider yourself a solo traveler, but you have a friend that says, hey, I'd love to join you on this. And you're like, that's great, but I still have to have my own room and have my own time. I would say that's still technically solo traveling.
Yeah.
Especially because you're dealing with the aspects of having your own solo cabin and doing everything, doing things separately.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to personally have more than one other person in the cabin with me. But you've got to make sure, especially on a longer one, that this is a person you can live with, at least for a short time, and that
Right.
if something stressful comes up, you guys don't let it ruin your trip, Like the lady I go with, we no longer do things together for the most of the time because we like doing different things. But so I end up being like a solo with a good friend in the cabin that I have dinner with.
Okay, so almost the opposite scenario, where you're still out on the ship doing your own thing and wanting to maybe meet other people with similar interests, because what you're interested in, you're doing alone. You're not doing with your travel partner.
Right. I understand that, and this isn't just for solo travelers, but anybody that's going, that every single cruise has a Facebook group where you can go on and meet people that are going to be on that particular cruise. beforehand. So maybe you can connect with a couple of people and say, let's meet at the Windjammer at blah, blah, blah time on embarkation day, or, something like that. How would we find that? And does every cruise have a group like that?
So I wouldn't just say that every cruise has a Facebook group, because as far as I know, it's not like the cruise line or any employee that's putting
Right.
this together that makes sure it's done. It's more of a community thing where, avid cruisers will do that and they'll create these groups, and you kind of just go onto your Facebook and to the search bar and kind of put those details in and see what you find. And yeah, more than likely you will find something. I feel like, especially here out of the US ports, they're very popular. I
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to speak for like the European ports or, other international ports. But that is a great idea to kind of go through, see what plans people are already making, see what other solo travelers are putting themselves out there. I would be very, very cautious of it though, as far as allowing anyone to private message you and make plans. And just be very, do your due diligence. And there are a lot of scams that pages.
Yeah, I've heard of like money scams and romance scams, and I'll buy the tickets for this excursion ahead of time. Everybody send me money. So yeah, I would definitely say I'll buy my own ticket. Thank you.
Right. But, especially if you're in a group like that for like a new Norwegian cruise, it's super simple to be like, okay, who's all going to meet up for the first solo
Mhm.
happy hour on day one,
Right.
or for the sail away.
Right.
And yeah, those are great perks. One thing that I stands out to me, the way Norwegian does things and the way they put their solo travelers together on their day one meetup, is they don't only do it on the first date; they do it every night of the itinerary,
That's
and
nice.
they'll even set up dinner reservations for you. If you have different people that are there, maybe you haven't actually had conversations with them, but you want to do like a specialty dining experience, and there's 2 or 3 other people that would like to do it as well. It's a lot easier for them to fill a table than to make 3 different reservations for 3 or 4 individual people. So that's really nice too.
Yeah, that's good because some of the people have like one of the places I went to on the second or third night, a bartender said, there was somebody here yesterday looking for that. That was the first night. And to me, I'm usually tired and getting acclimated and unpacking. And, I don't usually I don't want to get dressed up and put on makeup and all that to go to an event that first night, you know? So it's nice that they have it every day, and that Norwegian, I'll have to check out that studio because, if you just kind of happen to go in during the day and get coffee, you might meet somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I'm not sure about, and I'll get some more information on it, is whether or not that's open to all solo travelers, because as far as my understanding, you have to use a key card to get into that area.
Right.
And from the way it's explained to me, is your key card has to, you have to have a key card for a solo cabin in order for it to work for the solo studio.
Mhm.
But if you're a solo traveler and say you did, pay the fee to have a balcony or to just have an interior room, have a little more space, I'm not sure if they work with you to still have that. I wouldn't think so, but I'll have to get more information on that.
It would be nice. Yeah, check that out because one of these days I'll be doing it, and I don't want to go into a 100 square foot, a 100 square foot little inside cabin. I want a balcony, and I do want access to that as well. The Travel with Brigetta owner Dan has gone on a whole lot of solo cruises, not solo cruises, but cruises solo. Okay, knowing nobody. And he actually works from the ships. He's gone on like more than half a dozen in 1 year while he's still working. So he's not taking time off work to do it. And then he'll play when there's an excursion he wants to go to, or like after hours, he'll go to all sorts of different things. How feasible is that? Like, is the internet good enough? And, what do you think about that?
So most of the mainstream Christians, especially, like your bigger bigger cruise ships, they're all going to be equipped with Starlink internet.
Mhm.
And so as long as you will have to upgrade to like especially for work, you're gonna want to upgrade to the best Wi-Fi package that they have. Not necessarily do you need, 4 different devices unless you do. But as far as having the coverage and the bandwidth and the speed, you're definitely gonna want to do that if it's work and not just Facebook and Instagram that you're checking. But it is very peaceful. There are a lot of the ships, they have their quiet spaces. I mean, I know most of the ships even have a library if you don't want to be confined to your own room.
Yeah.
So it is. I see it all the time. More than likely, the next cruise I'll be doing the same thing. It'll be the first time I do it, but Dan encouraged me because he says it's more than possible.
Cool. What if rather than just going solo, I wanted to put together a group or a club of either my friends, maybe a family reunion, maybe people that love Star Trek or the Love Boat. I mean, just whatever I wanted to do. My local singles group, my church. What if we wanted to put together our own group for the discounts? Can you, as a travel agent, put that together for us?
Yeah, of course. That's what we do most of the time, actually, because exactly like you just said, it gets you discounted rates and it also gets you more amenities, usually, depending on the cruise line. And that's another great way to get started with maybe your solo travel adventure. Is you want to, do your own thing, you want your own room, but you have the idea of already these like-minded people in your life that you'd like to do this trip with.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you would like to add about, groups or solo cruising? Maybe something that Dan might have mentioned in passing to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say, like I kind of mentioned earlier, especially if it's your first time or you're, in a new destination, and especially at the ports, just being completely aware of your surroundings and really paying attention to the people around you. And I know we've done an earlier episode on all the possible scams and, pickpocketing that happens. So you want to be like extra diligent with those things because you most likely don't have someone else watching your back. And especially one thing I would say also about being at port, you don't want to be late. That's something everyone knows, but especially if you're completely alone and you have, no one else keeping you accountable or, your phone's on 10%, something like that, you just really want to be aware of the time and, how far or close you are to the ship and making sure you get back on.
Yeah, that would be horrible to be stranded all by yourself in a country like, I don't know, Belize or Roatan or, someplace you don't know anybody. And even if it's a country where you don't even speak the language, so you really have to watch that. That would be enough.
And that will lead me into saying the third thing would be, I would especially, you need travel insurance. If you're going to be by yourself. I mean, you need travel insurance regardless, but, adding the factor of being completely alone, I would say that's extremely important.
Yes.
Having your travel insurance and, making sure you're traveling with your passport on you because you have no one on the ship to get it for you if something happens. You're completely on your own and you need to make sure all your ducks are in a row.
And don't wander too far from the port, in an area that is not really tourist oriented, unless
Yes, I would agree. I would agree with that unless it's, for a specific excursion that you've done, a good amount of research on it.
Right.
You've done some research, read reviews, and, sometimes that happens, especially in these very touristy ports. You might have to drive a few miles to do, like a horseback riding excursion or, maybe ATVs through the jungle or something like that. Like, yes, you might have to go a little out of the ways, but, if you researched this excursion or your travel agent recommended it to you, you have some kind of back to the boat guarantee. then, that's all fine. But if it's something where you just kind of walked off and someone with a sign said, hey, ATVs for cheap, and you just kind of took off, yeah, that might not be the best idea.
Yeah, that would be scary. If you're not going to go with the cruise line, which I don't necessarily recommend you do, there are reputable companies that you can ask your travel agent about that will guarantee you get back, and that you're not going to be with some shady person that says, I'll give you, an ATV.
Yeah, exactly.
You've been listening to the Seize the Day podcast powered by Travel with Brigetta. We would love to answer any questions you may have and also hear your comments. So please feel free to make a comment below. On behalf of Karla and me and the entire Seize the Day team and Travel with Brigetta, thank you for joining us. And until next time, seize the day.
You've been listening to the Seize the Day podcast, powered by Travel with Brigetta. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe. And as always, feel free to ask us anything in the comments section. We love to hear from you. Or email us at bookings@travelwithbrigetta.com. Till next time, seize the day.